Tommy Sykes, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it.
So Tommy, I discovered you on Twitter. There was a tweet you had posted talking about real estate in Italy and France. And I guess if you could talk us through how you discovered or were drawn to Italy and France, that would be great.
Sure. So, like a lot of creator topics, it was really just a personal passion for me. I've traveled to both Italy and France, and now being 52, married, but we have one kid left to go to college before we'll be empty nesters. I always had this dream of doing more travel, like longer term travel, if possible. My business, my financial planning business, is all virtual, so it can be done from pretty much anywhere. And just this, in the last few years, after my parents passed away, this idea popped in my head of, again, a dream you have like for a long time of your life. You get to a point where you think you have to kind of do it. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And then just discovering that both France and Italy, in particular, in both countries, the southern parts, which to me are maybe the most beautiful parts of those countries, the real estate is super cheap, or you can at least find super cheap real estate. You do not have to be a citizen to purchase real estate in either country. So anyway, that's the kind of what got me interested in it. And then of course it's a rabbit hole you can go down. It's fascinating.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, when you posted the tweet, I think it was something to the effect of I bought a house in Italy and France for less than what I could get in the US. And I kind of went looking actually, and there were a couple cities in Italy that were offering houses for €1. And I think it was to facilitate some sort of, some growth in the city. Are those the types of cities you're looking at?
It depends, and I'll just real quick one
Sure.
correction. I have not purchased
Ah,
property
okay.
in either
Okay.
country yet. So I'm in research phase.
I got you.
I do know of people that have done this, and there's some great blogs and YouTube channels where people basically document as Americans, buying, and again, often they're these really cheap places, and then maybe renovating them, things like that. Um, but yeah, I will say this, because I've done the exact same thing that you just mentioned. Like when you see this, there are places that have these €1 um, homes to buy. From my research, the they're €1 homes only in name. They're almost always have to be completely renovated. Oftentimes, I mean, you would almost have to like tear down walls and reconstruct. So I mean, it's a good marketing thing
Hmm.
from Italy to do this. And the reason they do this is a lot of these, again, in both Italy and France, tons of these over the last, several decades, um, as agriculture has lost employment, and um, there's so many more online jobs or service-based jobs. There's been tons of migration in both countries out of rural areas into cities. So northern Italy is where the majority of the population lives. That's where Milan, obviously Rome is like halfway up, but the northern areas, Venice, Milan, um, Turin, this where the absolute majority of the population lives. So in an effort to get people to move, or, either domestic or foreign people to move back to these areas, the government basically said, hey, let's again offer these places as super. I mean, these places are again, no one's living in them. They may have been empty for years. Again, sometimes there's damage. Roof needs to be replaced, things like that. But it's a way to entice people to at least start considering, um, again, what I'm considering, which is like, hey, buy a place for $30,000, put a couple, a few $1,000s of upgrades in it, and have a place you can either visit, on a regular basis or rent out on Airbnb or something like that.
Okay. So I want to talk more about the real estate, but I just want to take a step back and talk to you a little bit about your CFP experience and that type of your life. What types of things do you help people with? For people that don't know what CFP even stands for, describe it a little bit and maybe talk about some of the things you help people with, and then also some of the things you're not really qualified to help people with.
Right. Well, this and I'll say this, the travel retirement, this new kind of thing, this is a completely new, idea for me.
Okay.
I do not, I honestly don't do anything professional in that capacity yet. I'm basically, passionate about it, building an audience. Down the road, I could see, digital course, maybe some, again, help guide people through what I've learned. But the CFP, which stands for Certified Financial Planner, just a certification you can get in the financial industry to basically, signifies you understand how to put financial plans together for people, investments, estate planning, kind of all facets of your financial life. And so I have a kind of traditional financial planning business that is where the majority of my income comes from. And then, like I said, this thing is a new kind of passion project. But like I said, I can see it turning into either just consulting people, hey, let's take a look at you want to move to Italy. You think you could afford a place that's this expensive. Putting a plan together where people, hey, let's take a look at all your current assets, your bank accounts, your investments, your 401k, what we might budget for travel, what we might budget for legal fees if we have to hire somebody in Italy, a bunch of things like that. And then maybe be able to walk somebody through in 6 weeks. Like, hey, we're going to get you from where you are now to, let's at least maybe have scheduled a 2-week minimum trip where you're going to go kind of like test it out. And how can we afford that without messing up a bunch of other things like our future 20 years down the road.
Okay.
So that's the kind of opportunities I see.
Speaking of testing it out, so you've kind of come to the conclusion of France and Italy. How did you go about testing out different countries?
Well, those I picked, again, basically because I love them personally. Mm-hmm. And I know of people, well, number one, just from a creator standpoint, getting very niche is a way to kind of build authority. Again, not that I'm an authority now, but if you study, a specific country and maybe even a specific region of a country for, months, the knowledge you have, even though maybe it was publicly available, the knowledge you have because you've curated it, again, you can answer a lot of questions for people that are kind of, I don't know, level 1 questions. Mm-hmm. So these two countries, I'm not beyond looking at other countries, but I know there are people who are doing the same thing, but for other countries. I just had not seen anything specific for Italy and France, other than, like I mentioned, there are people who are the actual, it might be a couple who, hey, here's our journey of, we are from America and now we live in France, and here's how we did that. Which again, there's a great value to doing that, but I think there's also a good value to doing, again, hypotheticals or kind of test, like, all right, let's say we pick this place and here's our financial situation hypothetically, how long might it be until we could do this affordably? Or how does it change our financial picture if we buy a $50,000 place versus a $150,000 place? How does it change if it's just a lock up and leave where we just own it, go visit, lock it up, don't rent it out at all, versus, hey, if we do Airbnb, there's a lot of little facets. And I mean, all that I just mentioned, that will be maybe different in Italy versus France. And then you expand that to, 10 different countries. It's just, there are specific requirements and rules and laws for each of them. So I was like, let's start with these two that I'm passionate about, number one, and there's a decent amount of information about already to start, and then maybe one day we'll expand to to other countries. South America, I know there's a very popular. Central America, um, Asia, Southeast Asia. So
I
hopefully
guess
that answered it.
yeah, I guess I'd be curious just on like some other expenses that come along with home ownership in a different country, such as property taxes, and then also operating. I mean, I'm sure going from the U.S. to basically any other country, the healthcare costs probably are going down. But what have you found out in your research about some of those lifestyle costs?
Yeah, the property taxes is an interesting one because again, in Italy and France, um, they both have regions, which are kind of like states.
Okay.
And then in France in particular, they have then individual departments that make up the regions. And at each level, there's a different government. So France, even though they have a federal government, it's not like the United States. These regional governments really make a lot of the rules as far as taxes, and they handle like the transportation and public transport, and then even individual towns and cities and departments can have their own rules. So it's very, you can't just say like, oh, the property tax is this percentage or whatever. It all it comes down to the very specific rules in that region. Same thing with Italy. Again, something I'm still researching, but I would say the property taxes are typically pretty reasonable. Again, we're talking about relatively lower cost properties anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, for somebody in the United States who pays $3,000 to $5,000 in property taxes a year, virtually all the places that at least I'm reviewing are going to be way, way less than that. Okay. So that's one thing. You ask about healthcare. Both Italy and France have great healthcare systems. I mean, they're ranked very, very high as far as world standards go. Same thing though, the rules are different for both. Depends on if you're there just on a tourist visa, which is just if you have a passport, you can go to either country for up to 6 months a year. Well, it's technically 180 days out of 365, but you have to split it up. The max you can be there at any one time is 90 days. Then you have to leave for at least 90 days. Then you can come back for another 90 days. So you'd have to do like 3 months, leave for 3 months, come back for 3 months. You could do 6 months total. On a tourist visa, you would not qualify for actual like French or Italian, like their health, I guess what you'd almost call like Medicare, mm-hmm. their nationalized health care. You would rather instead of that, you would just be on a like digital nomad health plan, which you can buy in the United States, which are again pretty affordable. But then the actual cost of healthcare in France or Italy, like point of service, like when you go into the office, those costs are way, way lower. So even if you didn't have health insurance, traditional like American health insurance, your actual cost may still be less than actually just paying the like monthly insurance premiums. So it's that is definitely a big question I've gotten, and I'm still researching it, but I've gotten a ton of questions from people saying, I want to know about the healthcare. The quality is excellent. I do know that, but again, it could be a good case study. Here's a hypothetical thing where this happens while you're over there. You're going to go to see the doctor. You get x-rays, you get this, you get that. Here's what that would look like, and here's how you would pay it. I'm still researching that, but so far, my feeling is it's still super affordable.
Okay. So like looking 5 years out, how do you see yourself spending time? Like how many months in each country? Like in your ideal world?
Um, I mean, ideal world, of course, it depends on family issues here.
Mhm.
My wife's parents, still live here, and our kids. One is finishing college soon. We already have one out of college, and then one is getting ready to go into college. Um, so I don't know how long we would want to stay completely away, but I could definitely see, um, again, weeks or maybe a month or two. Um, I mean, I know one thing I've talked about doing in the past is like go to France and follow the Tour de France
Okay,
around.
it's pretty
So that
cool.
race goes on for a month. And this is very, I mean, people do this as a popular thing in Europe and, um, you know, people from overseas, where you basically go and rent like a RV and just basically follow the tour around to all these beautiful places. It goes all the way around the country. Um, so that'd be, be a longer term trip. Now that wouldn't involve staying in a house that you own necessarily. But of course, if you did own a house, you could go by, do some fix up or whatever, check in on it. Um, Same thing with Italy. I mean, there's like festivals and all these little villages and towns in France and Italy have, you know, each town has its own little festival, depending on what time of the year it is and what region you're in. I could see going to Italy for a month or two, and again, maybe stay in one location for a few weeks, but then tour around and visit these other spots. Um, Again, the idea being you could do this for really cheap,
Mhm.
relative to staying just regular life in America. The cost of living is so low, you could do this and probably save money
Mhm.
overall, rather than staying here.
Now, are you also interested in potentially getting citizenship in one of these countries long term, or is that not really on your radar?
That's not on my radar right now. I have been in touch with people on Twitter, who've gotten in touch and said, "Hey, I'm actually going through the process right now." I know like Italy has a very popular, but it takes a long. Just there's like a backlog of if your parents or grandparents were Italian, so had Italian citizenship, you can basically qualify for citizenship if you go through this process. Um, at this point we're not thinking about living in France or Italy like full time, like
Mhm.
retiring there at this point.
Okay.
um but who knows,
Yeah. Okay.
depends on what happens in the United States too.
Uh-huh.
Politics are crazy, and you know again, healthcare is pretty nuts. Housing cost, there's a lot of benefits to at least spending some good amounts of time overseas just from a financial standpoint.
I'm in Austria right now. I know on real estate transactions, the closing costs are, I mean, compared to America, like astronomical. Like we're talking like 10% of whatever the actual list price is. You can expect to pay an additional 10% in closing costs. Do you know anything about closing costs or additional fees when you're going through some of these real estate transactions in these like France and Italy?
um I think now that is one thing I think that is pretty standard in each country as far as the percentage. I don't know if it's negotiable, but I believe both of them it's around 6 to 7%.
Okay.
Um, the houses, I don't if you've ever seen like the houses that I profile sometimes on Twitter, where I'll say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this place is for this much money in this area, or whatever. Those prices, when I ever quote them, that includes the um the certainly includes the realtor commission and
Okay.
some of the fees. There are some fees that I think you can't include in that actual transaction. But again, this is something where I'm still researching, and
Mm-hmm.
that would be again a great case study to just say, hey, you know here's what the cost is of the place cost, and then you have to pay this tax, maybe to move in, or you have to pay this extra tax if it's a second home. There's some little details, but I don't think they're crazy.
Okay. And then in terms of actually getting agents, like how does how do you sense like the language barrier being like do you speak French or Italian and how do
I
you
speak
go
a little
about
French.
uh-huh.
Yeah, I
Okay.
speak a little French, but um, from experience, both countries, number one, you can find English speakers fairly easily. I won't say like, I mean, there's pockets where obviously it would be probably difficult. Um, I know for France in particular, there's one website that I research for properties that's called Leggett, Legett,
Okay.
and the lady who started that, um, maybe I think it's Joanna Leggett. Anyway, she's British, so like a ton of her real estate people are either Brits who are living in France or they speak English. So, they either can help you through the process, answer questions. I mean, when I email, they respond in English,
Okay.
um, or they'll have somebody, they'll be able to refer you to. Oh, well, we have these, real estate attorneys or people that speak English. So I don't think I don't think that would be as big an issue as some people might imagine.
Okay.
Of course you would want to do as much as you could, learn, make
Mhm.
the effort, and try to make it as easy as possible for them. If they're going to help you out too. So, but yeah, I don't think it's that big an issue.
Okay. So do you have like a short list now of like I know you said like southern areas in both countries, but like cities that you're really like targeting now?
I don't have I, I don't have specific ones other than there are areas I know I'm not looking at. Like
Okay.
if somebody is interested in like buying a place in Paris or Rome or in one of the big cities, I'm not going to be looking at those spots.
Okay.
Number one, there's tons of other. I mean, there's tons of blogs and video, YouTube channels and things of people living in those cities, American expats or British expats, just purely because that's where all the people are.
Mhm.
And they're traditionally the kind of romantic, sexy places. But just from my wife and I, our travel, we you know we spent a day or two in Rome. We spent a couple of days in Paris, but the magic for us is out in the countryside. The geography is incredible, mountains and rivers and valleys and coastline, and that to me is where these little villages, on the top of a hill with a castle, and uh, you know, you can buy a place that was built in the 1600s. I mean, there's a nostalgia, I don't know, about it that
Mhm.
kind of gets me going. Um, so yeah, that I would say these regional areas, which again, ironically, are also the cheapest, are the ones that I find the most appealing.
Okay. I mean, just out of curiosity, do you have any worries about? I know Italy in particular has a very old demographic, and I mean, obviously they're trying to get people to come to these some of these cities because the populations have decreased so much. Does that, I guess, make you a little like just weary of some of these areas, or is that not really play into the decision?
I mean, from a from a safety standpoint,
Just
or
like
just
I guess my thought would be maybe it's just difficult in terms of having access to a lot of the things we're accustomed to in America if there's fewer and fewer people in some of these smaller towns. I mean you're gonna have to sacrifice on some things.
right,
um
right. Yeah, no, I get what you mean. Like, one question I've gotten a bunch to for some of these very rural villages and towns is like, do they even have internet?
okay.
Like, or what's the speed? Like, is it dial up?
Uh-huh.
Um, and my research so far is yes, these places have not only they have internet, but oftentimes even these regional places or rural places are the internet is as fast or faster and cheaper than the United States. Europe, I think, was way ahead of us on um, that kind of technology. Um, Another thing I just thought about, the properties I'm talking about, because of the demographics. Again, people still leaving these areas. There are expats, a lot more expats considering purchasing properties, fixing them up, renting them out, things like that. But you definitely would want to um, go in with the understanding that it's not like the United States property
Right.
market where you're going to buy a place for $50,000 and then in 5 years it's going to be worth $150,000. That is probably not going to happen. Now you could do, obviously, the beauty of real estate is you can actively do things to increase the value, upgrading and cleaning and painting and the furniture, and there's a ton of amenities you can add. But yeah, just thinking, oh well, it's like America where I can go buy a house, fix it up just a little bit, and then just wait, and it's gonna, you're gonna make your money back. I would not go into it with that kind of expectation for sure.
Okay.
It's
Interesting.
possible, but yeah,
Mm.
the again, these rural areas, the real estate is cheap for a reason, supply and
Mhm.
demand. Um,
Mhm.
but my feeling is if you're gonna, spend again 50,000 to $100,000 on, and you're thinking about doing it in the United States, like we want to buy a little place and maybe Airbnb it in the United States, you're going to buy a closet for that. Whereas in Italy and France, you could potentially buy, a 3-4 bedroom place. Now it's not, a castle, it's not a chateau, but there's an appeal there for just pure like nominal value. Like, I mean, again, in my area, I'm in rural North Carolina, which is, again, is not a hot spot of real estate activity, but I literally don't think I could find any any structure to live in under probably, 80 to $100,000, and that's going to be maybe a mobile home or something,
Right.
just not even comparable.
In order to have these options to travel and live wherever we want, we got to get our finances in order. What things in your life have really moved the needle in your financial health?
Um, I mean, just cost of living is the number one thing. So, you know, how much is your house cost relative to your income? So whether that's your mortgage or your rent, um, I think housing costs, transportation costs, and insurance for most Americans are the three biggest expenses. So again, if you're making, $50,000, but you got an $800 a month car payment, you're just absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. Um, it's just it's just like lighting the money on fire to me. Um, you know, we always have driven used cars, paid off cars. We've never had a car payment, and if you don't have the money now, just have to save it. Budget for it, set it aside. Um, Housing costs is the same thing. Don't buy a house based on what you can qualify for, because the bank wants you to they want you to butt up right against the max of what you can potentially borrow, because it's more money for them. They don't care. They don't care about your financial, you know, fitness going forward. They're just like, well, we think this is the max we can give them that they'll actually be able to pay back. Now they're not going to be able to do anything else with their life, but this is, the max we can qualify them for. Um, I would take any money that you qualify for as far as mortgage payment. I would just cut it into take 2/3 of it and say, okay, that's my maximum budget, and then that extra third is going to go. Number one, it's going to go to things like property taxes and maintenance and things like that. But that then will become your savings money invested in your, in stocks and bonds. Make sure you're doing your 401k up to the match. That's the money that down the road will be the fun money for doing stuff like travel or buy a place overseas.
Okay. So you mentioned getting the 401k match. Are there any other investment vehicles that you really feel are underutilized by Americans?
I mean, because of this, like what we're talking about, buying property overseas and having optionality, just a regular old brokerage account, regular old taxable investment account is, I mean, people of course know about it, but on Twitter and personal finance Twitter, it's people talk about taxable brokerages sometimes, but that's really a great option. If you say you buy ETFs or even individual stocks that don't pay a dividend, that means they're 100% tax deferred as long as you don't sell.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, again, buy 50 different individual stocks and just let them ride for 20 years. And, if they pay a dividend and you're reinvesting it, you're going to have to pay some tax just on the dividend income, which is tax advantaged also. But that capital gains, you're never going to pay any tax on as long as you're not trading. And that money, again, it's unlimited. You can put as much in as you want. You can take it out anytime you want. Again, as long as you own the things for a year and a day, you have great capital gains tax rates. And again, that's the money versus a 401k where you're going to have to pay ordinary income tax. If down the road, you're like, number one, if you're under 59 and a half, you're going to have some choices to make. But then just from a tax standpoint, taking money out and having to pay ordinary income tax on it versus maybe pay a max of 20% can give you a lot of options.
Okay. On the insurance side, what would you say, like if maybe sole breadwinner, family of four, how much insurance would what type of multiple of one's income should one get in insurance? I'm kind of curious
Oh,
on.
life insurance. I'm a
Yeah.
huge advocate. I mean, I'm
Huh?
52. I have a term insurance policy. I think it's $1 million policy. And
Okay.
then we have one on my wife also. Um, I got it probably, I don't know, 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's a 20-year term.
Okay.
So it'll basically take me through age
Yeah.
70.
Okay.
Um, and I think it's $700 a year,
Okay.
something like that. Um, I'm not I'm not a fan of like whole life, like permanent policies,
Okay.
unless I mean it's very rare. I mean, there's very specific situations where I would recommend somebody do that, mostly for estate planning purposes. Um, but yeah, life insurance, if you're the moneymaker, the cool thing with term too, I mean, you want to cover that future potential lost income. The cool thing with term too is you can stack it. So say like our house, we still have, I don't know, let's say 10 years to pay the mortgage. So I could buy a 10-year term policy that would cover the cost of the mortgage payoff, like whatever the max is right now. Of
Mhm.
course, it goes down over time. And then you could say, well, my kids are this age, and so they're going to graduate college by this age, whatever that time span is. Say it's like 15 years. You say, I want to buy another term policy that has the amount of money that would cover their college cost. So people sometimes think of term insurance like you buy a policy, and you don't have to. You can basically match policies to whatever liabilities are important
Mhm.
for you. Um, you know,
Okay.
like the one I have, our kids, we already have college money for them. Um, but it's just an income replacement. So my wife would be taken care of um, if something were to happen to me, and vice versa. Um, but yeah, that's. I mean, term insurance is amazing, but it's also very flexible. You can do a lot of things with it.
Cool. Well, as we close out, I like to ask, and you might have already answered this, but I like to ask each guest, what's the best piece of personal financial advice you've received, and then the worst piece of advice you've received?
The worst piece, and this is not advice I necessarily received, but
Uh-huh.
I did used to work before I was a independent fee only advisor. I did start like in the brokerage world, in the salesperson world last year or so. The Anybody young who gets pitched whole life insurance, like permanent life insurance policies as an investment, like people that say 401ks are a scam or Roth IRAs are a scam, and instead you should put money into an insurance policy, I would absolutely run. I would run away. That is some of the worst advice for young people, because think about it, all insurance is a contract. It's not like a brokerage account where I can go buy, I can open an account, put some money in it, buy some stocks today, and literally next week I can be like, I that was a bad decision. I'm going to sell them all and have them send me the money. It might be a little bit less because of the market, but I'm going to get back virtually all of my money. Again, plus or minus whatever the market's done. So almost no internal expense. These insurance policies, number one, most of them are just, you just got to keep paying. You got to keep paying the premium, whatever you agree to, or else, number one, the policy lapses, which means it just goes away. Or if you want to then get your money out, you're going to get, cents on the dollar. Um, anyway, I could rant on that for a while. Um, the best financial advice, I mean, it's cliche, but just buy assets, as often as you can. Well, I should say this: buy appreciating assets, because a car is technically an asset, but it's a depreciating asset.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you wouldn't go buy a TV and think, man, this thing's gonna be worth a lot one day. Like next year, it's gonna be worth like half of what you paid for it. So buy appreciating assets as often as you can. So that would be, again, your home, uh, 401k, other investment accounts, most real estate. Um, you know, you can buy businesses. You can buy like an online business. You can buy a website. There are things you can buy that have a good opportunity to grow in value over time. And you stack enough of those up, then that's where serious wealth is developed.
Okay. Now going back to the whole life, because I am one of those guys that does like now some people call them infinite banking policies, some people call them overfunded whole life, and I basically banked through a policy like that, and it was that the agent gave up a huge cut of their commission to allow me to have a high early cash value that then I can borrow against. And now this is just the other side, and I definitely, there's no free lunch, and you definitely need to understand the surrender charge period and the stipulations with the policy. But I guess I would just say, used in the right way, I think they can be very valuable. And I've seen it personally most in the sense that a lot of my real estate that I own, if I wanted to pull equity out of that, I'd have to go
Mm-hmm.
pay some sort of doc fee or underwriting fee to get access to pull cash out. Whereas if I have an asset like a whole life policy, I can just go borrow from that with a click of a button. And that's kind of where I've seen the value of that. And I think so. It's just something to think about. And this is, and I'll repeat this. This is I would only recommend this with mutual and companies, not stock companies. But just I guess the other side of the coin a little bit on that one, if I were to push
Yeah.
back. But I'd say in
No,
general,
and I appreciate that. And like I said,
uh,
there are cases where it's appropriate. I just see it, again, pitched as a replacement for
yep.
super easy, super low cost things where, again, it's much more rare than it's pitched to be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it never is appropriate. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it sounds too good to be true in a lot of
Yep.
situations, and it often
Yep.
is. So you gotta, again, you gotta do your due diligence and read the fine print. And it's again, it's not like a brokerage account where it's very simple. You can open an account, you can do some things. It's been around for for a long time, so people kind of understand it. The nuances is where the
Yep.
where the important stuff is. So
Yep. Absolutely. So, Tommy Sykes, why don't you tell the listeners where they can go find more about you?
well, I would point them to my new, like I said, my new kind of passion project, which is Travel Tirement. If they just go to traveltirement.com,
Okay.
I'm doing a weekly newsletter where basically I profile a cheap property right now in either Italy or France. Um, Talk about the area that it's in, maybe some things to do, just to kind of start opening people's minds to, again, what reality versus maybe what their perception is. And then also just, I usually will talk about some kind of related travel, info, or again, maybe something about the taxes, maybe something about the health insurance, like we've talked about today. So anyway, they can sign up at traveltirement.com. It's free, and that would be great.
Awesome. Well, Tommy Sykes, thanks so much for coming on. I think the listeners will get a lot of value out of this.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Jack.
Yep. Take care.